released, and she did that about a week ago. So
Really?
that's doing really well. So yeah, she's doing really well.
This is your daughter?
Yeah.
And she released a single?
Yeah, this is her third one.
And what kind of music?
It's kind of pop music, you know. It's kind of
Okay.
blues.
How old is she
Some
now?
of it's bluesy kind of thing. Hey, how you doing? Huh?
How old is she now?
She's 20. Yeah, she writes and
Oh, really?
produces and
Hey, you.
sings and everything. So yeah, she's really talented.
Now,
So,
does she live with you?
yeah, well, she lives in a dorm now, but
Okay.
but
And
yeah,
so
when
where's she in
comes to
school?
Lipscomb.
At Lipscomb.
Yeah.
That's a great place for music.
Yeah, and then I have another daughter,
Sign that.
and then she is a executive with Bargain Hunt. She's over all their web stuff and their advertising and stuff like that. Okay,
All right, we'll get to run dinner. We got
I
plenty
think
of
we got
time.
plenty of time. Yeah. Yeah, it is 6 o'clock. So just to make everybody aware in the room, we are recording now. So we're going to get started here in just a minute. And we're already recording. Steve. They stayed. That's okay. That's okay.
Bloody nose a while ago.
Mm.
The last time Jillian ever does that. He just dry, so much dry heat. I blew my nose. Wow. Great roll.
Rico, 601.
Okay, I'd like to call the January 11th, 2022 General Committee meeting to order. We will go around the table and specify who's here. Mr. Hayes.
Yes, I'm Jonathan Hayes, Alderman Ward 5. Glad to be here.
Jim Waters, Alderman, Ward 6.
Keith Free, Planning Director.
Andy Robertson, Ward 6.
Jesse Eckenroth, Chief of Operations.
Mike Stanley, 10 Properties.
Okay, thank you all for being here. I know the mayor's got some on the agenda, said he'd be back shortly, so. We need to approve the minutes from the December 14th, 2021 meeting.
I move approval.
Second. Moved by Mr. Hayes, second by Mr. Waters. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I will note that I abstain.
Thank you.
Ordinance and resolutions. Ordinance 2022-01, an ordinance rezoning 6.10 acres of property located on the east side of Jenkins Court, north of Saundersville Road. Peterson's not here, so I will move to put it on the floor. Discussion. Mr. Hayes, you guys do it.
Yeah, we were just talking, Mr. Stanton and I and Mr. Waters, and this is property that was needed for the sewer and for some of the easements. Mr. Stanton, do you have any comments about it?
No, again, it was just property that they came to us, said, hey, we'd like to sell it instead of sell you the easement, and we said, that's fine, and we bought it. And this is just a natural migration, and the FTP, when we got it approved, we showed this on there, knowing that we had to come back and do this process. So this is just a continuation of what we already started.
So you're going to say 626 to 638. Well,
And if we chose to keep it in the county, which is then, we'd get about 10. We didn't think that was the right thing to do, so we wanted to bring it into the city under the same regulations Forest Park. We've agreed to pay the same fees associated with Forest Park, at least $3,500 a lot, so it just made sense to annex it and keep it part of Forest Park.
Mr. Stanton also mentioned that they made their first significant over $300,000 impact fee payment. And they're ready to get things started. If you had to predict when you'll break ground on the first lot or home, what would you just guess?
Two different things. Lot, probably, we gotta get the CDs created and approved. We're hoping to break ground this summer with construction start end of the year, first part of next year.
And then, for example, a front entrance, is that something that would be before that or after that?
We're gonna focus on putting the front entrance in as early as we can, so that we're ready to go vertical with that front entrance is in. So I would hope by the end of the year, we'd have that front entrance in.
And that CD he's talking about, that's construction documents
Yes.
Okay.
for the roads and.
I
all the
thought that had to
utilities.
do with the 300,000 and maybe interest.
No,
Okay.
no.
We did make that payment last month.
And I think it was 300.
He's messing with
313.
us.
I think it was 313,000. Is that
313,000.
correct?
And then when we record the plat, we pay the
Okay.
other three.
So how much,
Now-
let's give me, go ahead.
Now this, we got the 313 and then we got the deal on the lots for these. But what we're talking about here, the 6.1 acres with the 12 lots, that'll be the same thing. So at the end of it, by the time we get everything, I think it's like 42,000 more additional.
Yeah,
And then this is, at this point, this is restricted to improvements on Saundersville Road and could include, if we needed to, the underpass that goes under the railroad. So it's kind of all, it's all kind of defined for that whole general area.
Any more questions, discussion? All right, all those in favor of ordinance 2022-01, please say aye. Aye.
aye,
All those opposed, none.
Oh, did I have, who's the first one? Who made the motion?
I did.
Okay, Steve Brown.
The chairman.
Jonathan. Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Resolution 2022-01, resolution hold a public hearing of proposed plan of services for property being annexed on the east side of Jenkins Court, north of Saundersville Road, as part of Forest Park. So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Resolution 2022-03, resolution discontinuing application to the Community Development Block Grant Program until the city resolves to make a future application. Mayor brings it to the floor. I'll second it. Pete, you want to speak to it?
Yes, this is, we've talked about this a couple different times over the last couple of years in the general committee. We've talked about our community development block grant funds. We're something called a participating jurisdiction. So we get a set amount. We don't know how much each year. There's a formula and it depends on how much Congress allocates. But typically looking over the past 5 years, it ranges anywhere from 201,000 to a high of 236,000 this last year on our direct, the direct amount of money that we receive. And I think as we've talked about before, this certainly is a lot of money and sounds like a lot of money. There's a lot of strings attached to it on spending it. It's limited on how we can do it. And there are several ways in which we can spend this money, and we have found ways to do it. With the limited amount of money, it is challenging to make sure that we're meeting all of the various requirements of the CDBG program. So even though we're only getting 230,000 a year, we still are held responsible like a city that's getting $6 million worth of funding a year. So we need to make sure everything is done correctly. It isn't something that justifies a full-time person doing it. I have somebody on my staff that just does it, as we need it done, and we just kind of touch it as we need to. The challenges with this is with the small amount of money that we have in the funding. It's just very challenging because any kind of project that we're doing typically would be more than $230,000. And so it's kind of odd, but HUD has something, HUD Housing Urban Development, not our local utility. But they have that they say, hey, whatever the money you got last year, you can't have more than 1.5 times that amount by April of each year. So, in order to do any significant project, for example, we've done things, the senior center, we've just let a contract for, I think, $611,000 in CDBG funds. Well, as you can imagine, that's almost 3 years of money. And we wouldn't even been able to put all of that together. But the only reason we were able to is that during COVID, the federal government said, hey, you don't have to worry about expenditure requirements. Of course, all that's fixing to go off. So those are some of the challenges. And just looking at it, the staff just feels that this is something that we really need to look at. We're at a point where we're either going to have to do our next 5-year consolidated plan, also followed up with probably get a third party to do an analysis of impediments to fair housing document, and a couple of other things if we're going to move forward with it. And it's just looking at all the things about the challenges of administering such a small amount of funds that staff just feels like it's something that's not probably not worth moving forward. And I know it's a difficult thing because we're getting money. We could, if we got out of this participating jurisdiction program where we get funds, then we could compete at the state level for possibly additional funds. It is challenging at the state level to compete. We're a fairly wealthy community, so there may be some challenges to that, but there is potentially more funding on an annual basis that we possibly could get. But it would be competitive, and we may even have to match, 26%. It depends on some different factors to do a project. But in that case, we might be doing specific projects that we determine and desire to do and then seek funding for it. Where now we're getting the money and then we're trying to find projects that we can do. And but I can answer any specific questions associated with it.
Mayor was had firsthand.
Keith mentioned the best part for a second is, yeah, we're closing the door on one grant opportunity, we're open one another to projects that we actually want to do and actually need to do. It's competitive, like you said, but it gives us an opportunity to work on some projects that are, to me, more needed. So yeah, we're giving up some money in one area, but we're making ourselves eligible in some other area. So that was
Mr. Waters.
Yeah, would you mind expanding number 9 on the sheet? If you got,
Yeah, let me take a look at that. Shifting priorities and requirements to receive CDBG funding through HUD can create a situation where a municipality is dependent on funds, but is not able to discontinue the program based on obligations.
explain that to me, would you?
Yeah, it could end up like, for example, this project that we're doing right now, we're fixing to start construction on, is a $611,000 for the parking lot. It could be in this specific instance, we were able to put together all of our loose CDBG money to make that work. But it could have been as a project we're going to do, and because of prevailing wage and just the cost of spending this kind of money and doing projects and the different requirements, it could have been $711,000. And if that had been the case, then we're faced with, gosh, we can't do that project. We got to figure something else out to do. Or, which probably we'd be looking at is, hey, if we had another 100,000 from the city, from city general fund, then we can fill that gap. And I think that's what that's kind of talking about.
Yeah, thank you.
Which
Thank you.
parking lot? Is that $600,000? What parking lot are you talking?
The senior center. So,
600,000 on the parking lot
Yeah.
at the senior center.
we spent, I think, about 500,000 doing the exterior of the building. And
Okay.
we totally redesigned everything. And then the parking lot is going to be 611,000.
So over 1.1 million
Yes.
in the past couple of years.
Yes, and we have
Big investment.
over, in addition to what we normally have, we have about $417,000 in CDBG coronavirus money. Now that's different than the ARA that I think y'all have been talking about. There's different restrictions on it. But on that, the one project we know we're going to do is the HVAC, the HVAC system in the senior center, that we're going to totally gut and replace all of that with all new kind of hospital grade air filtration and heating and air. So it's quite going to be costly, probably, we don't know yet, but it's probably going to be in excess of 100,000 for that. So we'll probably be up to about 1.3 million. And then you might wonder, well, gosh, why are we focusing on the senior center? Although that is a very good place to put it and it's very needed. It's just with the restrictions on these funds, those are low mod clientele, and it meets and checks all the boxes, so that we can say we're spending the money and we're meeting the obligation requirements for who we're serving with the funds. And it's getting something done that would be very challenging. I mean, that would be very, very challenging for us, if you can imagine, over the last 3 or 4 years, for us to spend 1.2 million in general fund money, even though that's a real need. It just would have been challenging to do that. So the funds are, I mean, they are good. And if they were more, it certainly would be worth looking at. If this was $2 million or $1.2 million a year, then I think, we probably would need to take a little deeper look at it.
Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've noticed really the last year that the federal government is getting more and more, they're tightening the strings on funds that go to local governments, to hospitals, to whatever. And so I think the way I read what you're saying is that this is a way that maybe we can retain more local authority by not receiving these funds.
Yes.
What the strings that the federal government, it seems like to me they're tightening up.
Yes.
That this will free us to allow us to make more decisions locally.
Yes. It is becoming something with these funds that in receiving those, especially when we do the new 5-year plan, and then if we continue, we had put off doing an analysis of impediments to fair housing. Okay, we kind of had put that off for a few years, and we were fixing to do it, but in the previous presidential administration, that was taken off the table, and so that wasn't anything you had to do. And then they've just put that back on the table, and then they're working on some things with it to increase the number of strings that are associated with that. So as anything that we're taking from the federal government, we do need to closely look at what we're agreeing to. And when we're talking about affirmatively furthering fair housing, I mean, that's looking at a lot of different things. And it's also taking a very good close look at our local zoning ordinance and development regulations, and and looking at those to determine, are those barriers to affordable housing? And it's not just determining what those barriers are, but a lot of these funds that we receive and the tightening of those strings could potentially, we don't know for sure, but could potentially result in the city being required to take action to implement what it is determined to be problems. And it's certainly something, even without this, we want to, as a community, to be aware of those things and not create barriers, but by potentially accepting these funds into the future, and as additional strings become attached, it may be something that's determined, decisions are made outside of this community about local things. But there's certainly value in understanding what about fair housing and availability of affordable housing in our community and expanding it. There certainly is value to that, but that is something to be aware of.
Got to be cautious.
Yes.
The moral of the story, when big government calls and says, let me help you, be cautious.
I move to approve.
All right.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. move adjourned.
I second that.
All opposed?
Aye.
Wait a minute. I said all opposed. didn't you?
I'm sorry.
All-
You talk too
The
fast.
last planning commission, I saw
He's
your
feeling better.
You talk too
He's over
fast.
that
He's talking too fast for me.
material
I'm
up
from
there
the
about
south.
how much time y'all are spending. and how
Oh,
much-
yeah.
Before I got down my mouth.
It really is amazing.
Yeah.
And
My
I have new
bad.
offices and homes,
Oh,
200
yeah.
plus every
Oh, it's a
year.
lot.
And that's probably,
That's in people's houses.
that's probably a small number. Most people, when they're doing it in their home, they don't buy
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Cut that out.
What catches, yeah. Thank you very much.